Welcome to Propaganda Loves You, the show that asks and answers the question, if Elon Musk cares so much about election integrity, then why did his own political action committee get caught committing voter fraud in Georgia? I'm Kodie, your host for this week, joined by Arthur and Joe.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Welcome back to Propaganda Loves You. This is I already forgot. What are we, week 5? Week 5? Episode 5? Something like that? I don't know where we are.
I forget if the weeks and the episodes line up or not. Are we out of sync?
I think we're on the same page, right? I think it's week 5. Yeah, welcome to week 5. We're here. And this is episode 5. So this week, we're going to talk kind of like our bigger topics this week are going to be looking at Elon Musk. His PAC's been accused of voter fraud in the 2024 election in Georgia. But before we kind of get into those, I did have a little bit of housekeeping and a quick icebreaker. The housekeeping I want to do, I think in our last episode, we gave an update on our listeners, where they're coming from, what we're at right now. And I did a really, really American thing, which is I just said, we've got these other countries, and didn't really say like where, what those other countries are that are listening to our podcast. So I wanted to mention, the top 10 countries outside the United States. Do you guys have any guesses for like the top 5 countries outside the US that have been listening to our show?
UK.
Russia. It's
I'm
just
just
surprising
guessing
to me. It's
English
always,
speaking.
yeah. I think Russia's up there.
You think
But
Russia's
UK is
right?
great.
Okay. So our top 5 outside of the United States. Number 1 is the UK. It's United Kingdom. This is
Is it just
number 1.
Five Eyes?
It's not, actually. Number 2 is Singapore. Number 3, Russia. So you got that one, Arthur. Whoever's listening in Russia hasn't listened to our whole catalog, but a little over half of it, at this point. And then we've got Mexico at number 4. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And Belgium is number 5. Yeah. Out of the 52 countries outside the United States, those are the top 5. And then rounding out the top 10, we have Spain, France, Germany, Northern Macedonia, and then the Netherlands. So that's what we've got for our top 10 listening outside of the United States. So 52 countries, not including the US, that are listening to this show. Before we get into our topics today, I do have one quick game to play. And we played this one before. This is basically, you got to try and spot the lie here. I'm going to tell you guys 5 different things that may have occurred over the last, week or so. And you guys got to tell me which one of these you do not think is real. Which one do you think is a lie? All right. So to start, I'll just go through all 5 of them, and then you guys can tell me which one you think. Okay, first, that the U.S. and Israel have restarted the war with Iran. I think we were on like a little pause there between the 12-day war and this, or whatever that 2-day war was. So that's number 1. Melania Trump is scheduled to chair the UN Security Council. That's number 2. The former prime minister of Norway tried to kill himself over his association with the Epstein files. Is number 3. The Trump DOJ has been accused of hiding files that accuse Donald Trump of sexual assault of a minor. And then the last one is Google and DOGE have signed a partnership where DOGE has signed a $1.2 billion contract with Google to use Gemini to automate savings in the government. So those are the 5. I can go through real quick. New war with Iran. Melania is going to chair the UN Security Council. Norway PM tried to kill himself over Epstein. Trump DOJ is hiding files associated with allegations that he sexually assaulted a minor. And 5, $1.2 billion deal between Google and DOGE.
I feel like a couple of them are obviously true, and a couple of them are plausibly true. And then Melania feels implausible to me for some reason. I'm gonna guess her chairing the UN is the lie.
Okay,
I'm
locked in.
praying that that's the lie, because if
You're hoping?
Melania is chairing the Security UN Council, we're all in deep trouble.
All right, we are locked in. So the lie here is that there is no $1.2 billion contract between Google and
What?
Doge. Yeah, I mean, Elon and Doge would be going with something like Grok, I'm pretty sure, to do that. Not Gemini. They're actually kind of against Gemini. So yeah, those other four things that I mentioned: U.S. and Israel strike on Iran on February 28th. The United States and Israel launched a massive joint military operation against Iran, codenamed Operation Epic Fury for the U.S. and Operation Genesis for Israel. So that has occurred. We'll be talking about that a little bit more here in a second, so I won't go into details. Melania she's been tapped to lead a United Nations Security Council meeting, and the event is scheduled for tomorrow. We're recording this Sunday. It's scheduled for tomorrow, Monday, March 2nd. And this is the first time a spouse of a sitting world leader has chaired a formal session. Her focus is going to be children, technology, and education and conflict. Number 3, yes, the former Norwegian Prime Minister Thorbjørn Jagland, probably got that wrong, was reportedly hospitalized following a suicide attempt. This came after he was charged with gross corruption linked to his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And number 4, DOJ and Trump Epstein files. Yes, recent investigations by NPR, The Guardian, and New York Times have alleged that the Trump Department of Justice withheld or removed specific files from the public Epstein database. The allegation here is that the missing documents reportedly included FBI memos from 2019 regarding a woman who accused Donald Trump of sexual assault when she was 13 years old. Attorney General Pam Bondi and DOJ maintained that no records were withheld for political sensitivity, claiming that any missing files were duplicative or privileged. So that's what's going on there.
Yeah, like, it wasn't political sensitivity, it was blackmail. We're holding it behind for blackmail.
I listened to 2 different podcasts over the week that kind of talk through this specific instance in detail with the reporters from NPR that actually broke the story in the first place. And the short version is basically like there was a victim that was interviewed 4 times by the FBI. So this wasn't like a one-off, oh, this is incredible type thing. They went back and interviewed this person 4 times. There was over 53 pages of like testimony that NPR was able to get from this victim that was not present in the files. So they purposely had removed these allegations from the files because they were against Trump. So I'll do a little promo recommendation for those 2 podcast episodes. I think one of them is actually from someone that we've quoted quite a bit, Greg Sargent from the New Republic. He did a podcast, Daily Blast. So I'll recommend that one. And then there's another NPR episode just that's really good that covers kind of exactly what they found and what has been held back. I think like we talked that a little bit when they were talking about releasing the files and like what this would look like. There's kind of an assumption that there are going to be files out there that people have copies of that they can check against this database. And I think that's kind of what's happening here. It's good that it's happening. It's good that they're finding these conflicts, but I don't know, it also kind of feels just like, what's going to come of it? I don't know.
I was trying to look up real quick. It was one of the recent-ish Supreme Court decisions about executive privilege. I think I remember, I couldn't find it real quick when I was trying to search just now, but I just noticed the language you quoted when she said the documents were either duplicative or privileged. And I thought that was a intentional choice to use the word privilege because that's the justification they're going to use legally for deleting all this stuff, is that it falls under executive privilege. And so that in and of itself kind of bypasses any sort of legal recourse we might have to use the justice system to hold them accountable if they're already planning that kind of defense. That's what came to mind.
That's the thing, is like whatever their interpretation of, they're just going to run with. The same thing with why they're trying to like create a voting crisis so they can nationalize elections for the midterm, right? They're coming up with whatever niche legal justification they can, right? And no one's going to hold them accountable for it except for judges that have been appointed that, follow the actual law. But that process, like we've talked about, is super slow. So I think that's exactly what I agree, Joe. Like it's they're going to just claim privilege over anything that's associated that even has his name on it, pretty much. So yeah, it's a little update into the what Epstein's filing cabinet of atrocities this week. Just to, continue to follow that, the NPR piece there, as well as what's actually occurring outside of the United States and people facing justice. I did see that not Bill Clinton. Well, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton both did their depositions, and kind of like nothing came out of that other than they both basically said, we don't know anything, right? That's kind of what came out of that. Like, just like, I'm having trouble believing that you know nothing, but that's what Bill and Hillary have said here. So
if I were like the sound effect guy, I'd hit the button that's like, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. It would be his clip. Yeah, it's the exact same. They just both claim nothing. But outside the US, like, at least there's some actual traction and stuff and broader investigations into like actual financial networks. And hopeful there's something going on there. But that's a sharp contrast between the US and outside.
Yeah. And there is the New Mexico investigation into Zorro Ranch too, right? So like there are things happening at the state level, right? Which is good. We need more information dug up on that. Oh, speaking of Joe, it reminded me. We talked last week about how Epstein won the lottery, right? So he won the lottery twice, New Mexico and Oklahoma. But so it made me look into it more. And so the theory is the one that seems the most plausible to me is that he didn't obviously go and like buy this lottery ticket and happen to get the right numbers. He probably purchased the winning ticket from somebody else, and it's basically a money laundering scheme where like someone wins like $40 million, they're going to get 20 if they go through the regular thing, but if you buy it for 30 and then you get 20, now you've got 20 million clean dollars, right? So like that's kind of like the theory is that he had people connected enough to where someone wins the lottery and they want to keep more of it, they're going to end up at Jeffrey Epstein's ranch like laundering money. So that made sense to me as to probably what occurred there.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah. I wasn't sure how the deal went down, but that sounds like a reasonable explanation. You want to win the lottery, you can be rich enough to buy it, apparently.
In an era of unpredictable public institutions, we are demanding certainty when it concerns our nation's children. That's why parents are choosing the Unified Education Network for our superior safety and clear standards. And now, the Liberty Institute asks you to share your wisdom.
When I retired, I thought my usefulness was over. But now, through the Legacy Instructor Program, I feel needed again. I get to guide young minds who are genuinely ready to learn, and I can trust that their classroom environment is secure.
The Legacy Instructor Program ensures the quality of our growing educational network. Retirees secure their full benefits by dedicating just a few hours a week to teaching the official Veritas Press curriculum, the very curriculum that underpins the network's superior standards.
The Unified Education Network operates on efficiency. We are tapping into our nation's most underutilized assets, wisdom and experience. You're not just earning benefits, you're ensuring ideological continuity.
Knowing I'm securing my retirement by teaching the absolute truth is the greatest reward. I feel like I'm making a real contribution to the future.
You are the final authority on the material that guarantees our students grow up with a clear national vision. Secure your future and guide theirs. Enroll in the Legacy Instructor Program today.
Let's talk about Iran and X and what's occurring right now in the Middle East. So it's Sunday. We woke up yesterday to notifications that we're bombing Iran again, and so it's been a day, right? That this new conflict has been going on. Honestly, we don't know a ton as far as like what actually has occurred and like who has been killed and how many people have been killed. There's been a lot of different reports coming out as far as civilian casualties, including schools getting hit by U.S. and Israeli missiles in Iran, as far as Iran attacking U.S. bases in retaliation. I think what I saw was 5 Americans injured or killed so far that we're aware of coming out of the Pentagon from this. And the supreme leader of Iran, at least as far as we know, it seems like he's been killed as well in some of the initial attacks. So before we get into this article, what we're going to talk about for this main topic is really talking about how Twitter is already just full of disinformation, trying to make it very difficult to understand what's occurring either way. And I saw this on Reddit too. I don't know if you guys did, but the amount of what looked like pretty clear, like bot engagement posts and content that's coming from sites like Russia Today, which is like a known disinformation outlet for the Russian government, like significantly increased across a lot of more left-leaning, liberal, whatever you want to call it, leftist subreddits and activist subreddits. And so we'll kind of get into what this looks like on X, but yeah, just before we get into that, any thoughts from you guys or anything you like about Iran in general or what's occurring here?
I think just like deeply saddened yesterday with more war. My thought on it in general was I was thinking about Israel and their strikes on like their precision strikes that occurred, and how here the news came like a few hours after, the first news of some strikes being made that the Ayatollah is dead. And so it kind of like, for me, unveiled like, precision strikes are very well done by this administration, Israel and the US, and they can obviously do them if they want to. But Israel today struck like an all-girls school in Iran. And so you're telling me that you can do precision strikes and you can actually get the leaders within hours. You could go into Venezuela right now and you can disrupt all systems and you can go capture the leader. But then you equally strike schools and hospitals just like Palestine. And it's really disgusting. And it's it's so depressing.
I think that's a super relevant point, especially after spending as much time as I did in counterterrorism. Precision, like high value individual target, that's a thing that people can do and have been doing for a while, but rather we want shock and awe and massive disruption and loss of life, right? Like you can't tell me that's not the intent, just like you said. They can clearly pick their targets much better. It's harder, it takes more time, but when you're dealing with taking human life, you probably should be taking the harder, more time approach. That's just my personal opinion, but yeah, it's depressing.
Yeah, I think it's a good angle you guys are taking on it. Like, I like the train of thought, I guess, because when we understand the technology that's used, it's obvious that precision is not only available, it seems to be ubiquitous. Like, dummy bombs aren't really a thing anymore in modern warfare when it's conducted by Western powers like the US and Israel. And so you have to assume every strike is deliberate, is intentional. And what is the intent of striking an all-girls school and killing 100 people, if not to terrorize the civilian population? And is that not in and of itself an example of what terrorism is? Like, that is terrorism, straight up. And that's what our tax dollars are going to fund right now.
Joe, you're talking about like it's basically us putting us in the terrorist seat because we're trying to use we're using violence, right, against the civilian population. And we're pairing that with our president saying, go and overthrow your government. Like, yeah, I don't know how you call it something else. Like, so like, I'm agreeing with you that, yeah, I think that's what we're doing in this area. We're using political violence. I'm not shedding any tears over the Iranian current regime. They've killed thousands and thousands of protesters, but we did that in Iraq. That's what created ISIS. I don't trust our government to do this in a way that doesn't just create another massive black hole vacuum that costs hundreds of thousands of lives. If this regime falls, great. Do we have another Iraq and Syria that we're going to be, doing here in 10, 15 years because of it? I don't know. But I don't trust this regime to handle it, or our government to handle it in any way that ends with a positive outcome, I guess. But anyway, okay. Enough on that. Let me jump into this article here, because we did an episode in season 1 where it was when Pakistan and India had kicked off that conflict, right? And it was talking about how quickly disinformation started spreading, like fake videos and everything like that. So that was an interesting, thing to talk about, but now like I feel like this is a good chance to revisit how quickly the water gets muddied and how quickly people try to just flood the zone with information, so it's hard to understand what's going on in this scenario with the US and Iran. So the article that I'm going to read here, it's from Wired. This is by David Gilbert. It was on February 28th. And it's called X is Drowning in Disinformation Following US and Israeli Attack on Iran. Wired has reviewed hundreds of posts on X that promote misleading claims about the locations and scale of the attack. Minutes after Donald Trump announced that the U.S. and Israeli governments had launched a major combat operation against Iran in the early hours of Saturday morning, disinformation about the attack and Tehran's response flooded. Wired has reviewed hundreds of posts on X, some of which have racked up millions of views, that promote misleading claims about the locations and scale of the attack. Elon Musk's social media platform is a verifiable mess. In some cases, alleged video footage of the attack shared in posts on X are actually months or years old. In several posts, video footage of apparent attacks have been attributed to incorrect locations. A number of images shared on X appear to be altered or generated with AI. Other posts attempt to pass off video game footage as scenes from the conflict. X did not respond to a request for comment. Under Musk's stewardship, X has become a haven for disinformation, especially during major breaking news events. At the beginning of the Israel-Hamas war, and more recently during anti-immigration enforcement protests in Los Angeles, the platform was drowned in inaccurate and faulty posts. Almost all of the most viral posts reviewed by Wired on Saturday came from accounts with blue checkmarks, meaning they pay X for its premium service, and could be eligible to earn money based on how much the engagement their posts generate, even if the content is false. While some posts with disinformation have a community note appended beneath them to correct the record, they remain up on the site and it's unclear how many people viewed them before the notes appeared. One video posted by a blue checkmark account claimed to show ballistic missiles over Dubai. The clip actually showed Iranian ballistic missiles fired at Tel Aviv in October 2024. The post has been viewed over 4.4 million times. One of the most viral clips shared on X in the hours after the attack claims to show an Israeli fighter jet being shot down by Iranian air defense systems. The video has been shared by dozens of accounts, including one post that has been viewed more than 3.5 million times. The provenance of the video is unclear, but there have been no credible reports of any Israeli jets being shot down over Iran on Saturday. Another account that claims to be an expert in open source intelligence posted a video showing explosions, alongside the caption, 6 Iranian hypersonic missiles hit the Indian-invested Israeli Haifa airport. Massive damages reported. The video has been viewed 64,000 times, but the footage was actually captured last July and shows an Israeli attack on the defense ministry in Damascus, Syria. In a number of cases, pro-Iranian accounts have been using images and footage from Saturday's attack to falsely claim successful strikes against Israel. Iranian missile impact in Tel Aviv right now, the Iran Observer wrote in a post featuring an image of Dubai. The post has been viewed over 200,000 times before it was deleted, but dozens of other posts sharing the same image and making the same claim remain on X. Tehran Times, a news outlet aligned with the Iranian government, posted what appears to be an AI-generated image on X with claims to show that an American radar in Qatar was completely destroyed today in an Iranian drone strike. The use of AI-generated images was flagged by X by Tal Hagen, a senior analyst with open source intelligence company Golden Owl. While there are reports that drone and missile attacks targeted the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, there are no reports yet of similar successful attacks in Qatar. ProTrump account, which also features a blue checkmark, posted images claiming to show before and after pictures of the palace of Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, which was targeted during Saturday's missile attacks. In a post on Truth Social, Trump claimed Khamenei was killed in an attack. While the after picture appears to accurately show the palace after the attack, the before picture shows the mausoleum of Ruhollah Khomeini, which is located on the other side of Tehran. The post has been viewed 365,000 times. So, two things, it's a relatively short article here, but the things that I find interesting, or the things that come up here that harkens back to that earlier episode with India and Pakistan, like the video game footage, reusing video game footage as war footage, old plane crashes, old attack footage being recycled and put back out as if it's part of this new conflict, and obviously AI generated, just complete fake fake information being put out to continue to muddy the waters. So I guess if I had a question for you guys based off of this, it's how do we get people to look at X the same way we get people to look at tabloids in the supermarket? Like, how do you get like that mind shift of like, you cannot trust anything that's coming out of this? because that's pretty much how it is these days. I mean, without significant research into something, like, are you 50-50 on X that what you're getting is pushed by, some government or actual news? So any thoughts on that in general, as we look at this conflict starting off?
It's a great comparison. It should be looked at like tabloids, like National Enquirer. It's so much bot activity, and it's just Elon, the king of like disinformation with the private company. It's crazy. Yeah, I think we got to increase like literacy rates, but they're drowning all the money. They're drowning all the schools, and I don't know. Yeah, but that's I love the comparison because they are it's like the tabloids of our time. It's totally just fake.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like my own experience on Twitter. Like, I haven't used it much. I used it for a while in grad school because there are a lot of professors who use Twitter, so it's kind of easy to keep up with the academic community. If you follow a handful of people, you can keep up with everything that's going on. And journalists use it a lot too. So I know it's been like a really big app for journalists to just sort of share quick information. But obviously, as Elon's controlled it, it's gone downhill fast. So I'm not on it anymore. I don't know what the average user experience is like on X these days. But I know there are people who like carefully try to curate their little bubble of communities, and they use it to keep up with like kind of a really niche community. And I guess it still is useful in that way. There are little niche groups of people who keep up with each other through X, through Twitter. But if you're just like generally looking at a feed that populates and pulls from, a lot of the For You feeds on these apps now just pull from everywhere, not just the accounts that you follow, but they'll pull in second, third, fourth removed accounts that they think are related to yours for some reason. And it ends up just being, pay to play content from these blue check marks that you're mentioning. Yeah, and so we're kind of in a position as users of trying to pay attention to how this experience of social media changes over time. Like, this is a different kind of media. The whole allure of social media for most of us has been a kind of media landscape that we can curate, that we can control. We can have some intentional choice over what we're seeing. But then as time goes on, we see that corporations put their finger on the scale and they change what we think we can control, and they make us see other things. And so there's this tug and pull between the user base and the corporate ownership. And yeah, at a certain point, we have to question the technology itself. Like, we either have to build it ourselves in a way that supports what we're really looking for. And some people are trying to do that. There's something called Upscrolled, which is a different social media app. I haven't downloaded and tried, but I've heard people say that it's like a community-driven approach, similar to maybe Blue Sky.
Yeah.
Upscroll is like the alternative to TikTok, whereas Blue Sky is kind of the alternative to Twitter. So there are experiments out there with different ways to create that experience that we know is valuable and useful online without all the corporate trash that gets in there and floods the air. Just like there's good literary magazines you can read, or there's fucking tabloids, So what I'd like to share today is really just a couple of thoughts about conceptual frameworks and ways of looking, different things that we've talked about on the podcast before, especially when it comes to history. We talked a lot about it in the book club when we were doing the 3 books we did last year on tyranny, when affirmative action was white, and the dawn of everything. We went through different kinds of paradigms or ways of looking at civilization and the way governments and people work. And you can notice, and I think we appreciated this through all of our conversations, that when you change your perspective a little bit, you notice different things. It's sort of like, what comes to mind is sort of this disco ball metaphor for seeing the truth. Whatever the truth is inside the disco ball. But the surface of the disco ball has thousands or many thousands of little pieces of glass glued on top of it, and you can only look through one piece of glass at a time. And so every time you look in a different piece, you see a different aspect of the truth. And so it's just a way of pointing out that no matter what paradigm or perspective you choose, something's getting left out. You're having to narrow your view in one way or another to highlight some explanatory information that helps you make sense of the world. Right? We're all just trying to make sense of the world, and you have to pick a perspective at some point to look through. And that choosing of the perspective limits your view in a number of ways. And so that's kind of the more general conversation about frameworks. But I want to offer a few of these for thinking about U.S. foreign policy. When we think about different actions that are going on in the world, how do we make sense of all the chaos? How do we try to understand the reasons behind things? How do we make sense of this? So probably one of the most decorated Marine in history is Smedley Butler, right? I think that's pretty standard U.S. Marine Corps history knowledge or whatever. But yeah, you do an extra pull-up for Smedley in the Marine Corps. One of his famous quotes is after he'd gotten out of the Marine Corps and done like a bunch of public speaking campaigns about foreign policy and sort of telling people about his experiences, he often would say he felt like he had been used as a gangster for capitalism. Through all of his career in the Marine Corps, he felt like he had been used as a gangster for capitalism. That was his way of looking at it. And so I kind of want to start there and just appreciate what he means when he says a gangster for capitalism. It's sort of pointing to the fact that the infrastructure of the U.S. government, particularly the military infrastructure of the U.S. government, has been leveraged by corporate interests to their own benefit. They make use of the military might in order to increase their profits over time, right? That's sort of the strategy of U.S. corporations. So I want to think about that a little bit, and I want to tie it to this passage from Howard Zinn. So I was teaching my English students this past week about paraphrasing and summarizing as writing skills, and how summarizing and paraphrasing things in writings are kind of different skills, but related in a number of ways. And I like to use examples from the Howard Zinn book, A People's History of the United States, because that's a textbook we use in class. And so I wanted to show you guys just an example of how Howard Zinn paraphrases another historian. This is from page 90 of A People's History of the United States, and it's about the Revolutionary period in the American colonies and how the American government was originally established. So he's looking at the Constitution, who was involved in writing the Constitution, and he's reading other historians talk about it. So he quotes Charles Beard, who is another historian who wrote a book called An Economic Interpretation of the Constitution. And apparently the publication of this book drew some criticism in the media. It was kind of like polemic, I guess you could say. But it's a great example of how language can be vague or clear and how writing works. So I use it as an example to talk about writing. So anyway, let me read this original quote from Charles Beard that Howard Zinn quotes in the book. And let's just think about this quote and see if we can make it make sense for a second. Sorry, go ahead.
Before you read the quote, what is polemic? Sorry, I don't know what that word
means. Yeah, fair enough. Polemic is like an intentionally agitating political statement. So polemics is like rhetorical fighting in politics.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So a polemicist is somebody who knows they're about to piss somebody off when they're speaking, I guess. Here's Charles Beard's statement that Howard Zinn quotes. It says, "Inasmuch as the primary object of a government beyond the mere repression of physical violence is the making of the rules which determine the property relations of members of society, the dominant classes whose rights are thus to be determined must perforce obtain from the government such rules as are consonant with the larger interests necessary to the continuance of their economic processes, or they must themselves control the organs of government." So that's the original quote. Makes perfectly clear sense, right? Like right away, it's just an immediately understandable statement. So it's kind of an absurd example of like how abstract academic writing can get, right? People really write like this. You really have to read and make sense of stuff like this in grad school. It's super annoying. So I use this as an example of how paraphrasing works, because when you paraphrase somebody else, you're trying to state what they're saying in totally different language that, in your view, gets to the point more clearly, more efficiently, more directly, right? So here's how Howard Zinn paraphrases that statement I just read. He says, "In short," Beard said, The rich must, in their own interest, either control the government directly or control the laws by which government operates. Now, which of those two statements makes more sense? Like, the paraphrase gets right at the point of what this other guy was trying to say, right? So I use that as an example of how paraphrasing works, but the topic of this example is right on point with what we're working with this week, with the things we're talking about. And so I kind of want to use this as the framework for understanding U.S. foreign policy. When you understand this statement, especially the paraphrase that Howard Zinn gives, that the rich must, because of their own interests, either control the government directly or control the laws by which government operates, that explains U.S. foreign policy. Again, with this understanding in the background that any view we take is reductive in one way or another. Of course, this reduces some of the complexity when you look at it this way. Of course, this leaves some things out. But it is a very powerful explanatory view for looking at what U.S. foreign policy is involved in all around the world. So when we look at what's going on today in the world, what we're doing, we see things going on in Venezuela, we see things going on in Palestine, we see things going on in Iran, and now increasingly we see things going on in Cuba that the U.S. government is involved with, that in one way or another we have some foreign policy going on. And so when you're consuming media about U.S. foreign policy, you'll often hear pundits say, there are U.S. interests in the region. Our forces did X and Y in order to protect U.S. interests or to secure U.S. interests. And what I'm suggesting with this view of looking at foreign policy through the lens of corporate manipulation and control of the government is when you hear U.S. interests, you should replace it with U.S. corporate interests. U.S. corporate interests in the region were protected. U.S. corporate interests were secured. So when you think about these different countries, Venezuela, Palestine, Cuba, and Iran, what are the different U.S. corporate interests in these different regions? In Venezuela, there's a lot of oil. We've already seen the oil tankers get seized and resold to the benefit of the U.S. government. That's part of the resource that corporate interests are interested in. In Cuba, there's a whole history. When you look at the history of the 1960 Cuban Revolution, one of the big things that happened that pissed off the U.S. government was that U.S. oil refineries were seized, sugar farms were nationalized, and other businesses, other private businesses that were either manipulated or controlled by U.S. corporations were nationalized and seized by the revolutionary government. And so U.S. behavior toward Cuba since then has been a sort of punitive role of punishing that Cuban government for seizing those U.S. assets. When you look at Palestine, there's oil, which we've talked about before, the oil field off the coast in the Mediterranean. There was a great video Cheyenne shared last season that we looked at and talked about that. There's a lot of farming land in Gaza and the West Bank that they want. And there's real estate now. When we look at how they're talking about redeveloping the Gaza Strip, there are all these corporate interests involved in the sport of peace that are wanting to set up real estate and to turn a profit out of this landscape of genocide. And then in Iran, there's also a big history. It's the third largest oil-rich country in the world, I believe. And there's actually a history of U.S. and Western government intervention in Iran because of oil as a resource. You look at 1952 and the overthrow of Mossadegh's government. Which corporation specifically benefited from that? British Petroleum, BP Oil. If you fill up your gas at BP, that's the company that benefited the most from the 1950 through 52 coup of the Iranian government. So yeah, that's just a framework I'm offering for us to think through in terms of U.S. foreign policy. And if we want to just sort of underline the goal of U.S. foreign policy, what is the agenda of U.S. foreign policy when looked at through this lens, I would say that the goal is to open all markets and labor pools and frontiers for the exploitation by U.S. companies. If U.S. companies can have access to the markets, the labor power, and the resources in any given region, then they will be happy with those governments. When those governments shut U.S. companies out of their labor, markets, and resources, then the U.S. government starts to intervene. That's kind of the framework that I like to look through at U.S. foreign policy. So interested in anywhere you guys want to take it from here, but I just thought I'd offer that view for us to think about, given all the news that it's hard to keep track of these days. That's just one way that I'm trying to keep track of it.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking when you send that is it'd almost be helpful just to talk for a second about how that actually works. I think sometimes when you think about kind of what you just walked through, Joe, and you say like US government is going to do X on behalf of corporation, I think people can look at that kind of abstractly and be like, well, and like in their head, maybe they're visioning like, I don't know, dark rooms and people making deals and like, some like nefarious thing like, oh, we're going to go, F this up. But I think the reason I'm saying that, and the point is, it's like, it's much more open than that. I mean, we have lobbyists that are going and pushing their agendas to directly to like the representatives, and then also all the money that comes in like to those representatives that then makes them beholden to whatever corporation is the one that's giving them this money, right? That opens up the phone line for them to be able to call that representative pretty much, whenever they need to. So I guess my point is like the mechanisms are very open and in your face. It's not like a secretive thing, right? Like it's not like this, oh, crazy conspiracy. This is just literally how our government works from a political standpoint of how they're lobbied, how they get into place. Like you have some people or Bernie Sanders that only take small donations and aren't beholden to that same power. But the vast majority of our elected representatives have taken money from them, right? My whole point of saying this again is it's not this crazy, like dark room, evil, like hiding thing. This is out in the open how it operates, right? I think people just
Yeah,
need to, I don't know, look at that a little bit.
absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that too, because it kind of points at the sociology of government. Like when we really think about how the government is populated, the different levels of government are populated by people from particular social classes. Like there is a sociology you could look at. And even, let me pull this up again, because right after that, Howard Zinn's doing this analysis with the signers of the Constitution. Um, he's talking about that quote that Beard, that he just paraphrased from Beard. And I'll just read this one paragraph. He says, Beard applied this general idea to the Constitution by studying the economic backgrounds and political ideas of the 55 men who gathered in Philadelphia in 1787 to draw up the Constitution. He found that a majority of them were lawyers by profession, that most of them were men of wealth in land, slaves, manufacturing, or shipping, that half of them had money loaned out at interest, and that 40 of the 55 held government bonds according to the records of the Treasury Department. And so this idea is that the people who populate the government are already from this group. Like it's not like they're separate groups. It is the social, it's as if there were a bunch of wealthy people. It's not as if, it's in fact a historical truth that there were a social group of wealthy people who were the colonists of North America. And they had primarily corporate interests. They were business owners. They had land, they had slaves, they had resources. They were turning a profit big time. And they socialized. They hung out together. They decided, you know what, it'd be really helpful if we created this thing called the US government to stop all these little rebellions that keep popping up, get all these people to come together and revolt against the British so we can run our own government and stop worrying about these Brits overseas. So these capitalists in the American colonies decided to start their own bureaucracy, and that bureaucracy is called the U.S. government. And that's the history we're sort of inheriting. So like you're saying, it's not hidden. It is out in the open because this is the organization of a particular social group, right? The idea that there are now working class people or people who come from a working class background represented in government, outliers like Bernie Sanders, those are anomalies, right? It's taken a long time for people like that to break through and actually get a say in the government. But for most of history, it's been predominantly white men, wealthy, landowning white men in the government. And everything else has been an outlier that's slowly progressed over time. So yeah, it is quite transparent when you look at the history of it.
Think it's ever changed for the GOP. It's all still, except for like Tim Scott.
Yeah, I think militarism. It's like it obviously persists not only because like elites profit and it's become industry, but it is like totally normalized, like what you both are saying. And I guess I was just thinking about like school and like being raised in the U.S. and you're obviously taught like U.S. history, and that often centers around wars and victorious soldiers and kind of puts a narrative around that. And then, of course, you have to do the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and, you're taught all these things. And cop. I mean, like, and then you think about like TV shows and video games, and video games are like, assault rifles. It's so fun. You're playing with people, just shooting them in the head. And then, there's like all these like TV shows about like glorifying, the detective and the cop and the action hero and Bruce Willis, whatever. And all of that is to say, I think that we kind of have this similar Jewish problem that like, Netanyahu's been trying to do with like the word Jewish, where it means a few things. And the support of militarism, like sometimes directly comes into contact with like you being against individual soldiers, as though those people have like any say over the policy or the whatever. And I think that needs to be like untethered to really be able to critique militarism, because nobody could run for like Congress being against the military. Nobody could be in public. I mean, you can't even run being against Israel these days. But I think, we need an untethering of like that kind of like language, I think, because it's so entrenched.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like it comes back to this idea of like the propaganda of the nation as a family, that when the government kind of paternalizes us, it puts us in the position of automatically deferring to their authority and identifying with them in a sort of paternalistic, familial way. And I think it's important to separate our identities from institutions. Like the history of an institution doesn't have to represent us. We can have a separate conversation about our identity and the identity of the institution. And we can identify with it provisionally when it makes sense to, when there's good work to be done, when we can take care of people through that bureaucracy, through that infrastructure, because the government has been used to do really good work. And it's important to figure out how to do that work. But we also have to be honest about who has the most control over this organization, who has the most control over the government. And it's always been the wealthy. It's always been profit over everything else. And so until we can untangle that, it's harder to have those conversations about the other skillful things that we can use the government for.
The other thing I was thinking about, Joe, did we mention the business plot? Have we talked about that before? Like you mentioned Smedley Butler up top, and it's just
we've mentioned it before, but I don't think we've really gone through the whole history of the business plot or anything. But I think you've talked about it a little bit before.
It's just like any time you talk about Smedley Butler, it's I honestly feel like the business plot, like we're in it right now. This is what they were trying to do, was basically put like corporate CEOs in charge of America. The business plot, there was a bunch of Wall Street guys that came to Smedley Butler and were like, hey, we're gonna get rid of Roosevelt, we're gonna put you in charge. Like they wanted to make him be the dictator because they thought he'd be better for Wall Street. They did not know him apparently, because he immediately turned them in. That's a true, good on that guy. But I feel like we're living that right now. This is what they wanted, right? They wanted open, like unhidden business corporate control of the U.S. government with impunity, and that's what we have at the moment. So I would say look up the business plot if you haven't, or read his book. I haven't read his book, but I've only heard good things about it. I think the book is called Gangsters of Capitalism too, right?
Wouldn't be surprised. I don't know that.
Yeah. Oh, well, it wasn't written by him. It was, let's see, Gangsters of Capitalism by Jonathan M. Katz is a book that uses the life of decorated Marine Smedley Butler to explore the history of American imperialism, connecting his military career in small wars from 1898 to 1930s with the rise of U.S. global power and modern-day consequences, including the link between war and capitalism. Damn, we should read that book. That should be on our list. Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors.
Listen up, patriots. You're being hunted, not by wolves, but by paparazzi and investigative bottom feeders. They're hovering drones over your perimeter, trying to catch a glimpse of your tactical workout or your faith-first gold bars. They want to turn your private lifestyle into a viral scandal. You can try to explain your side to every hater with a camera phone, or do you want a shield wall?
Shield wall.
I was just minding my own business, working on my ironclad armored SUV in the backyard, when I noticed a drone hovering. I can't even enjoy a Patriot protein shake on my own balcony without seeing a picture of it on the internet the next day. I don't want a PR team. I want a physical, impenetrable, no-fly zone made of American steel.
At Ironclad Tactical, we don't negotiate with the public's right to know. The shield wall is a tungsten-reinforced middle finger to every journalist on the planet. One tap on the app and your property becomes a featureless, signal-jamming fortress in under 5 seconds. You could wait for the courts to define invasion of privacy, or do you want a shield wall?
Look at that drone. It's trying to peek at your Patriot tier outdoor assets. You could throw a rock and get sued for aggravated assault. Or do you want a shield wall?
Privacy isn't a right, it's a tactical advantage. You could hope for a fair trial in the court of public opinion, or do you want a shield wall?
Ironclad Tactical. The world ends where your driveway begins. Shield wall.
Ironclad Tactical is not liable for structural damage caused by high-velocity deployments. The shield wall is designed to repel the non-compliant public only. Use of the barrier to obstruct federal asset requisition or Patriot strength party enforcement will result in immediate demolition mode activation.
So if you were paying attention to Elon Musk back in the 2024 election, he got involved obviously a little bit later. At least he publicly got involved later, coming out on stage with this dark MAGA hat and really creepy, I don't know, jumping X gesture. I don't know. It was really weird to watch. But Elon Musk got involved, and he has a PAC, multiple PACs that he started in association with this. One called the America PAC. I think we talked about this back in some of our really early episodes, but one of the things that the America PAC has been under the fire for quite a few different things that they've done. As an example, like going back to, that election, one of the things they did in Pennsylvania specifically was sending out mailers to two different groups of people. So if you were Jewish, you would get a flyer that basically says that Kamala Harris hates Israel and is going to not support him and everything like that. If you were Palestinian, you would get a flyer that basically says Kamala Harris is best friends with Israel and whatnot. So they got in trouble for that. I'm paraphrasing what was on the cards, but completely opposite messages to two different groups of people based off of, what's going on politically. He also did the lottery. So if you're registered or whatnot, you had a chance apparently to win $1 million, and he was trying to increase registration through that. And he talked a bunch about how he felt that there was, widespread voter fraud and whatnot. So as last week, there was some updates related to his PAC and what it actually did in Georgia. I'm going to read a quick article here from the New Republic related to this. From Edith Olmsted, like I said, this is from the New Republic. Title, this was on February 20th. Turns out there was voter fraud in Georgia by Elon Musk. The State Board of Elections found Musk's PAC sent pre-filled ballot applications. If Donald Trump's administration really wants to find evidence of foreign interference in Georgia's elections, they need to look no further than the president's old friend Elon Musk and his shady super PAC. Members of the Georgia State Elections Board voted Wednesday to issue a formal letter of reprimand to Musk's America PAC over the billionaire technocrat's illegal scheme to get Trump elected. Georgia, a key battleground state in 2024, was the target of an aggressive campaigning by Trump's team. In October 2024, the Georgia Secretary of State's office launched an investigation after receiving numerous reports filed from residents across several counties saying they'd received partially pre-filled absentee ballot applications from Musk's America PAC, according to John Favor, the state election board's chairman. There was evidence to suggest America PAC had violated a state law that prohibits any person or entity other than an authorized relative to send an elector an absentee ballot application pre-filled with the elector's required information, according to Janice Johnston, the SEB's vice chairman. America PAC has also failed to display in a conspicuous location that this was not an official government publication, but was not provided by the government and was not a ballot, Johnson added. The board swiftly voted to issue a letter of reprimand to America PAC. A letter of reprimand, guys. This letter comes week after Trump suggested that his director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was spotted lurking around a federal raid at an election office in Fulton County, Georgia, because she was investigating foreign interference in elections. It should come as no surprise that the only evidence of meddling with people's votes came from Trump's own camp. Same thing happened in 2020 election as well. So that's it for the article there, but just wanted to, highlight that piece I don't even know. Propaganda doesn't even feel like the right word for what Elon Musk does. I don't know. Is there a word for stupid propaganda? Because there should be. Dumb. I don't know what it is.
There's already propaganda. There's got to be something for what Elon's doing. But yeah, we should. That's an interesting thing. We should unpack the flavors of propaganda. Propaganda is a big umbrella, a big tent. there are a lot of subtents for propaganda. We should maybe chart that territory conceptually. But yeah, what would we call Elon's brand of propaganda? It's blunt, it's obvious, it feels stupid. What's a good
No
word for that
bullshit.
kind of
Oh, yeah, blunt in your face. It's obviously obvious lies. I don't know. We'll think of something there. But anyway, so wanted to start with this on Musk, right? Because he's got the election pack, right? I think the other thing that was interesting about this article was just the fact that it was insinuating here that it was possibly trying to masquerade as a government document that he's sending to people. So the other piece that I wanted to mention about Musk that I said up front. So a little bit of history. Musk came in obviously after the election to do DOGE, right? The Department of Government Efficiency. And in order to start the Department of Government Efficiency, it would have taken like an act of Congress to create an actual new organization, right? Like that would have had to be something that they would have done. So in order to not do that, what they did was they took the DDS, which was the Defense Digital Service, which was the Pentagon's basically their what Navy SEAL equivalent IT department, right? The smartest Silicon Valley guys all coming in to help with getting government more efficient through the use of technology. That's what DDS was. It came in originally to try and clean up the debacle of the Affordable Care Act, and they had like the websites and whatnot to register, how that kind of like fell apart. These guys were brought in to try and fix that after the original contractor kind of like blew everything apart, right? Anyway, I've worked with them in the past when I was still working in government. Everyone that I worked in from DDS was great, super professional, really just trying to find technical solutions to problems that they had. Most of the original DDS staff had quit or left. They basically got turned into a very small, like all the original heavy hitters got turned into this very small team that eventually was basically disbanded. And so all of the original guys for DDS that came in to try and solve problems were pretty much gone at that point. And so what Trump administration and team has come to realize is that they need to, at least in what they're saying, is come up with a tiger team or some super Silicon Valley squad that understands technology and can come in and fix a lot of the problems that we have in government related to technology. And so they're going ahead and they're trying to create this new DDS-like organization. But where is this coming from, or where are these people that are going to fill this? Well, it's looking like it's going to be Larry Ellison and crew that are coming in to staff this new thing, right? And so the reason that I wanted to bring this up and alluded to it earlier is, to me, there's a ton of things that are wrong with this, but it, to me, feels like a continuation of this tearing down of whatever the institution was before, regardless of whether that institution worked, didn't work, doesn't matter. If it came from not them and doesn't have their DNA in it, then it's tear it down and replace it with your people, replace it with your institution, replace it with your culture. I think you see the same thing. And the reason this all ties back, right? That's what I think the Twitter takeover was. That's what I think the TikTok takeover is. That's what this is, right? Like there's multiple versions of this occurring all over the government in different ways, probably ways that we don't even realize or aren't being advertised at all because they didn't have Elon Musk out there like an idiot, like drawing all the attention to himself. So this story is very clear. There's probably a ton more that are happening in the background that we don't see. So that's kind of the small update that I wanted to give to you guys and just get your thoughts on that, right? Do you think that is the intent? And also just highlight the I guess the stupidity of, DOGE in general that, stood up to save money. And now we're building another organization to replace the organization that it took over in the first place. So not exactly efficient.
Yeah, I guess the only thought that comes to mind is, it kind of seems like you're asking a question about intention a little bit, like what do we really think's going on here? Why is this the strategy that you see getting deployed across the board? The sort of infiltration almost of government infrastructure by corporate interests, by elite groups. And what I heard in there was the idea that loyalty to that group is more important than technical expertise or proficiency. Like, they're not looking for skill in the job necessarily. Before that, they're looking for loyalty to the cause. Like, And that whole framework of Smedley Butler being a gangster for capitalism comes back to mind. It's like, yeah, this is what gangsters do. They make sure that their people are loyal first and foremost before they care about whether or not they're good at the job. If you're not loyal, you're useless. Get out of here. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's a great take. I guess I just thought about how inefficient it was, how if Elon came in and did like a Sig Heil and said big balls, big balls is going to be my boss, I'm out. So I get it. And Twitter is like the exact same. Like I've followed all those, like, it was like a big layoff in my industry, and I have to do like recruiting. And so I followed a ton of those engineers on their Substacks and stuff. And like all the senior Twitter people left, and they all, talked about the stats and data that was real. And so I can only imagine what like DOGE really had going on. And now there's leaks coming out about like our social security numbers and, mishandling of like, all this information and stuff. So I think it's just operating exactly how they want. And it's horrible. I don't like, and now Ellisons are going to control it. The Ellisons are highly problematic. We just talked about how they have like privatization of Warner Brothers now, right? And Paramount and TikTok, and where are the monopoly laws?
That's like a whole, just another example of that institutional teardown, right? Of CNN into Fox Light. I don't know what they're gonna make it, but yeah, they're paying 100 billion, some crazy price for that, for influence, not because they're going to try and make money. They're not going to turn DC Comics into Marvel. That's not why they're purchasing WB. I guess is my guess here.
And like money doesn't seem to matter. Like, some of these Epstein deals that we've seen, like, they're selling houses for like $10 next to them or something. Like, Elon pays $40 billion for Twitter. Like it does not matter, because they know that they can steal $50 billion from some stock deal that, the investors are going to give them whatever later down the road. It's totally imaginary to them.
It's also, if they can control whatever narrative or whatever, like if they're controlling all the media, same. I mean, shit, this makes me think back to the Elders of Zion conversation we had the other day with fucking Henry Ford running newspapers, right? Like, and it's the same thing. It's just the new version of that. And then Joe, you said something there too that I wanted to fall back on. It's like this loyalty. It must be loyalty, and it's like I have, when you talked about your framework for how to think about how the U.S. does things overseas, and it comes back to, like, is it good for corporations, corporate interest, profit? If you think about the fact that the president and probably most of his cabinet are criminals and are felons and have committed these crimes, and if their crimes are found, like, then they're probably going to go to jail, then the rest of their actions make a ton of sense. Like everything else they do, yeah, that all lines up really well. And so that's kind of how I've been thinking about it. It's a criminal organization. It's a criminal administration. So if you think about what would a criminal do in this scenario, there you go. I guess.
I mean, that's the take. It's literally organized crime. Like, I don't know what else to say about it. You can just watch it happen. You can watch The Sopranos, or you can read the news. It's the same story.
Okay, well, this is a short little update that we want to provide, but just to kind of close out this here, obviously none of this had to do with efficiency with Doge. They're not trying to make money with Twitter. This is all about, honestly, a hostile corporate takeover of the United States government, or maybe it's not a takeover, Joe, like you're saying. It's just a unmasking of the corporate ownership of the government, or they've got Trump wasn't lying when he said he knows how it works. He's just, being honest about open about it. Jesus. All right. What would be good, probably, because Arthur, you mentioned this, in the future when we have more information, is to continue to follow up on Elon Musk and Doge's actions, like you said there, the social security numbers, like where that's gone, how they connected information from multiple databases inside the government that are supposed to be firewalled against each other, or how they created logins for certain government databases that were immediately accessed or tried to be accessed from Russian IPs after they created that, we've had whistleblowers coming out and mentioning this. So like there's a lot more here on Elon Musk, Doge, and whatnot. So we'll probably be following up in the future, assuming we have, good reporting from the Ellisons and CNN on his actions. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. We did want to mention next week we are going to be doing our Edward Bernays talk through. We kind of gone back and forth on how we wanted to do this. And while I was doing some research and reading the different books that he had in his biography, there are a couple of different podcasts out there, including Behind the Bastards, that have covered Edward Bernays from just a biographical perspective. So what we'll do next week, I'll do a quick kind of walkthrough on Bernays, but I'm actually going to recommend a few episodes if you want to get more detailed on him specifically as a person. What we're going to focus on more is the methodology that he recommended and how he really looked at the world from the perspective of not selling someone something, but changing their lived experience to the point where they need that thing, and how that applies to today and what's going on today. So for some homework, if you would like to participate, next week on Thursday, we'll have the first deep dive episode where we are actually going to be talking about Adam Curtis's documentary, Century of Self, which goes deep into Edward Bernays, but also talks about Sigmund Freud, his uncle. Super interesting documentary that kind of talks about how the population of America was kind of controlled or thought to be controlled by the elite class, or how they thought about controlling the regular populations of the United States. So really interesting documentary. We will go over that next week. To leave with some good news, I'm not going to read the article, but we talked about flock AI cameras in Saranac Lake last week. They have been removed, or they are going to be removed. There was a town hall meeting and multiple people went and brought this up. And so the mayor said, we heard you and we're taking them down. We're going to revisit the issue. So little good news there for the week.
That's awesome. You got
That's
some
awesome.
really great listeners at your city council and mayor. We had to do, it takes 10 different meetings of yelling back and forth. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, they definitely heard him, and it was great. I didn't expect it to be that fast, but the response was quick, and yeah, it's good to see. So, good news.
Love to see a government listen to its people.
Oh, yeah.
That's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening and hanging out with us.
If you enjoy the show, help us spread the word. Leave a rating or review and share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think would get something out of these conversations.
Your ratings, reviews, and shares help this show grow, and the more people listening, the harder it is for propaganda to win.
So until next time,
Stay aware, stay safe, and remember,
Propaganda loves you.